And it is the Saturday Coffee Klatch with Heather Lofthouse and yours truly, Robert Reich. Heather, what do we have in store today?
Good morning, Bob and all. We have What's the Election Outlook, Kamala on Oprah, more political scandals like Mark Robinson, and more political violence. But let's get through it together.
Let's do it together, and let's be upbeat. I'm feeling, my usual optimistic, nauseous optimism about this whole thing. I really do. I think we're on the right track. Kamala's on the right track. America's on the right track. The economy's on the right track. But I'm nauseous. I'm nauseously optimistic.
Well, it's scary. And let's get into it. There are polls. But so voting started this week, early voting, 44 days out. What have you been paying attention to?
Obviously, I'm looking at the states and the swing states especially, and the polls are not absolutely clear. Kamala is moving a little bit ahead. In fact, in several of the swing states, she's about 4 or 5, even 6 points ahead. In Georgia, it's a deadlock. In Nevada, it's a deadlock. I don't, what worries me, honestly, is that the polling as a science is still so far from what it should be. And as we've talked about before, a lot of people who are for Trump don't tell pollsters they are for Trump. So again, I think it's looking good, Heather. But now that voting is starting, we still don't know very much.
Right. Well, the polling is far from what it should be, and humans are far from where they should be, it feels like also. Pennsylvania, the fact that this election could come down to 10,000 Pennsylvanians, which sounds like a song waiting to happen, floors me. I mean,
10,000 Pennsylvanians. Right. There's a song.
I know.
But it's really not just 10,000. It's about 40,000 people in could be 3 or 4 or 5 of the swing states, including Pennsylvania. But what worries me about Pennsylvania is, they refuse. The Republican Senate in Pennsylvania refuses to allow any of the mail-in votes to be counted until Election Day, which means in Pennsylvania, you're going to have a lot of late news, a lot of late counts. The later it is after Election Day, the more mischief, the more Trump can say, well, there's all sorts of nefarious things going on.
That's it. And let's just phrase, the word for this is the red mirage, right? And this is what he does. And we count the rural, smaller places sooner, and they tend to be more red. And then he says, and then we count the urban centers and it shifts to being more blue. And he claims that's where the, rigging and the stealing is happening, when it's just how numbers work.
Exactly. Georgia is another similar problem because in Georgia, the election board is now taken over 3-2 by right wingers. And they've already said that at the county level, if you have any concerns at all, don't certify. You can't certify if there's a reasonable, whatever that means, cause for being concerned about about whether things are going right. Well, it gives the county boards, particularly the Trumpers, more opportunity for delay, more opportunity to hold things up. And I just want to remind Heather, you, everybody, that this ultimately is going to be played out in Congress in terms of the certification. We went through this already, obviously in 2020. Now, the person who is going to be vice president, who is going to be sitting there and determining the certification process for certifying, is going to be somebody named Kamala Harris.
Which will be used against her, right?
Which may be used against her.
Of course.
But the Republicans, what I'm really worried about, the question is, do the Republicans stay in control of the House, or do Democrats get control of the House
And what's your answer?
Well, I don't know. I think that it's looking better. This is why down ballot voting is so important. Everybody's focusing on the swing states in terms of the Electoral College. That's completely understandable. But it's also very, very important for everybody, even if you are in California and New York and states that you don't think, well, are going to make much difference. It will make a big difference in terms of the House of Representatives and maybe this certification issue. So just vote and take it very seriously.
It's good advice. Also, eyes on Texas. We cannot stop looking at Texas. All red is up right now over Ted Cruz. Kamala's still down, obviously, but not by much. And this change over time has been fascinating. And if Texas goes blue, what electoral college? I mean, and I'm not saying it will. I mean, that would be incredible. But there is a movement over time, which is part of, and you were always talking about this, Bob, the long view and what you've seen over time. And I think we have to remember that there's going to be 2028. If Kamala won in November and then is running again in 2028 and could win Texas, it would be a fascinating turn of events as it relates
Absolutely. If Texas, the mere fact that we're talking about the possibility of Texas turning blue is just warms my heart.
I know.
And we can't get overly confident and complacent, but I think that there are places around the country. She's running a campaign that is obviously appropriately focused on the swing states, but she is also going everywhere, and which is fabulous.
Yes. And she was on Oprah yesterday. So you and I have both said, let's get her out. We'd like to see her on more news shows, people claiming they need to know more about her, please. So she went on Oprah. Millions of people watched, and then millions more watched all the clips. And there was that heartbreaking story of Amber Thurman's mom. Of course, that was the woman who died a preventable death related to the overturning of Roe, related to abortion care in Georgia in 2022. And the mom shared and the sisters shared their experience, and that they were trepidatious about coming forward, but they thought that was selfish. And all the people crying in the background. The cameras were blurred, right, on the background, but so many, you saw tissues going to, the corners of people's eyes, and it was very emotional.
Well, never underestimate the power of stories, of personal stories, even in an election where, it seems that everybody's caught up in numbers. No, it's the powerful personal stories. And who is the champion of telling powerful personal stories? That is Oprah Winfrey. So for Kamala to be on Oprah Winfrey's show on Thursday was an amazing coup, and particularly with regard to the issue of abortion. Now, here's where we really do have to drill down a little bit. Women in this election are going to be absolutely critical. I have not seen as large a gender gap, particularly among the young, as I have with regard to this election. And women vote, more than men vote. 3 million more women are registered to vote than men. So women of America, we're counting on you.
That's it. And so later, I'm going to do a little foreshadowing, but later we're going to torture you with another clip. I can't wait from when this is the Bob was psychic, and this year was 1996. So we'll play it later. But you're talking about the white male vote and Democrats. This is back in 96. And it is interesting to watch who is picking up on the Kamala Harris campaign. Now, obviously, Oprah's audience was very focused on women yesterday, and it was a woman's story that they were showing in that particular segment. But what are your thoughts on that?
Well, I think that the white Christian male, working class, really has been the story of America since the 80s and 90s. You remember Pat Buchanan, he ran for president 3 times. People didn't pay a great deal of attention because his chances were very low. But that white male working class, particularly the Christian working class white, that has been an undercurrent, and it's grown and grown and grown as Democrats have sort of focused on the suburban swing voters, the college-educated voters, and basically created a political void into which, obviously, Donald Trump jumped and changed the Republican Party. Now, if Donald Trump loses, the big interesting question is what's going to happen to all of those working class, white, evangelical voters, rural, non-college voters? Are they going to go back to the old Republican Party? Is the Trump Republican Party going to live on? And if so, who's going to head it?
Yes.
And we're going to be living with this, Heather. I mean, I've said before, the election is obviously critically important. But if Harris wins, as I hope she will, Trump and Trumpism is not over. It's still there as an undercurrent, a major undercurrent in America, as unfortunately is political violence.
That's it. But Trump is still very much a presence. I mean, J.D. Vance is just horrendous. We watched him all week being nefarious and saying that he's going to be creating lies as he needs to create stories, basically lying to the American people as needed.
He's worse than I even thought he was. I mean, I watched him become senator, the hillbilly elegy, which I thought was very self-serving, and Peter Thiel bankrolling him, Peter Thiel, the billionaire, bankrolling his senatorial campaign. But basically, I watched him be a chameleon, say whatever is necessary, whatever the current father figure, whatever he has embraced, wants him to say.
Yep.
And it's not only unprincipled, he really is a dangerous character.
I thought that was a great line from Jamie Raskin at the DNC, where he called him Trump's pet chameleon. That's good.
And that's saying something.
It really is. But okay. And how about, Trump this week? I mean, first of all, we have not talked about the second assassination attempt and all this political violence that's happening and being stoked. That was how many days ago now? We haven't seen each other for coffee for a week.
That was last Sunday.
I know.
But it does seem like an old story. I think the interesting thing is that Trump almost immediately started blaming the Democrats for inciting violence. This is Trump's old technique. Whenever he's cornered and it's clear that he has done something, he starts blaming the other side. And the irony here is that you and I have said, that Trump is a fascist and Trump we have to fight Trumpism and but those words, that he is dangerous, he's a threat to America, those are not incitements to violence. I have said, you have said repeatedly, no, we've got to do this legally. We've got to do it carefully. We've got to do it under the rubric of the rule of law and the Constitution. But Trump himself is the one who has been for the last 8 years inciting all kinds of violence. He is Mr. Violence. The use of the word hate is probably comes out of his mouth. That word hate. More than almost any other word. He says, what did he say right after Taylor Swift endorsed Kamala Harris? I hate, with bold letters, I hate caps. Taylor Swift. Yep. And during the debate, he said, Kamala Harris, Biden hates you, and Kamala Harris hates Israel, and Kamala Harris hates the Arabs. He's so filled with hatefulness, he doesn't even know where to end.
It's so horrendous. And then, of course, Elon Musk, richest man, about to be a trillionaire, perhaps, comes out and says he's stoking the violence online. Talk to us about that and why the heck, I'm being classy here. Why is the news and the corporate media, obviously, not talking more about Trump and what he's doing Musk, also Trump, in this election?
Musk is also a very dangerous figure in the sense that, obviously, not only is he the richest person in the world, but he also now owns what used to be Twitter. X, the platform. He has 190, 200 million followers. People follow what he says. The press follows what he says. So when he puts up a tweet that says, why isn't anybody talking about assassinating Biden or Harris? He took it down. He said it was a joke. But no, millions of people saw that. And millions of people understand that Musk is himself. I mean, look, he took away all moderation from X. He fired all of the people who were moderating hate speech on X. himself itself has become a vehicle for the worst kinds of hate. Look what happened in Great Britain just a few weeks ago in terms of the race riots because of what was put on X. He himself, Musk, has endorsed and encouraged much of this incendiary, these lies. And why aren't we doing more about Musk? I posted something a couple of weeks ago, listing 6 things that we should be doing. The United States, other countries, we should be taking action.
We should. I know. And he was not happy about you posting that. And then he does online bullying with this huge platform. He's changed all the algorithms. I mean, Twitter is not what it once was.
Heather, sticks and stones may break my bones.
Yes.
But Elon Musk's name calling is fine.
I think that's how it almost rhymed. Okay, what else is on the list? So how worried are we about post-election certification? You mentioned Georgia. I mean, I'm scared about this. I mean, November 5th, first of all, are we going to be texting each other on November 5th? We're not doing a live coffee clutch. We can't.
Well, wherever and whenever and however you want to meet, and everybody out there, whatever you want us to give you some reassurance, we will do it. Look, there is likely to be some trouble after Election Day. Who can indicate, who knows what kind of trouble? I mean, Trump has even used the term bloodbath if he's not elected. I think that he has seeded county election structures around the country with his own people. I think there will be, as we move towards certification, there will be a lot of allegations of improprieties coming from Trump if he loses. But Heather, the good news is not only is Kamala Harris in charge of certification as the vice president, but also there have been enacted by Congress in light of what happened last time on January 6, 2021, some improvements in the process. So, for example, a state cannot refuse to certify unless 20% of its congressional delegation goes along with it. Well, maybe not a huge safeguard, but still something of a safeguard.
What about Nebraska and Maine? They've been in the news a lot this week in terms of their winner-take-all systems. Do you think something will change in those states in the next 44 days?
Well, interestingly, most Americans probably didn't realize that those are the 2 states that don't have winner-take-all systems for the Electoral College. That is, they're proportional. If Donald Trump gets 80% of the votes in Nebraska and the 20% go to Kamala Harris, she still gets some electoral votes out of Nebraska. And Maine is the same way. It's proportional in terms of electoral votes. Every state should be that way, but you have 2. Now, what the Trump people want to do in Nebraska is move toward a winner-take-all system so he can scoop up the electoral votes that because the state is probably going to go for Trump. It's a very incredibly red state, and they don't want her to get any extra votes. Well, look, there's going to be these kinds of things, these kinds of shenanigans going on all over,
right?
And
the scuttlebutt is that Nebraska, they waited this long. These strategists waited this long because in Maine, there's a 90-day window that's important in terms of a law being enacted. So we'll have to see. More will be revealed. So in other words,
let me just make it clear.
Yes, please.
In Maine, which is going to go for Kamala Harris, that proportional allocation of electoral votes works to Trump's favor, and therefore, if in Maine the law is you can't change the electoral allocation within 90 days, and that 90 days have already passed, so they do it in Nebraska, and people in Maine say, well, we are going to do that, all winner take all. Well, you can't do it anymore.
That's it. Thank you for explaining, as you do. So all of these scandals, I mean, I cannot keep track of the number of Republican scandals. So we have Mark Robinson, the gubernatorial candidate, who already was illegitimate in many ways and had problems. But now all this new stuff is coming out about how he's lived online and where he's been to nefarious sites and what he said about, being a black Nazi and these just horrible phrases and anti-Martin Luther King and on and on and on and on. So we have him.
How did he get as far as he got? He's lieutenant governor of the state. In North Carolina, the law is if every time the governor leaves the state, the lieutenant governor becomes the acting governor. So you can't, the governor doesn't dare leave the state. And this lieutenant governor, who's next in line, is kind of besmirching the entire state, helping Kamala Harris. Because, and hurting Trump. Right. I mean, voters in North Carolina, when they see him on the ballot, that is Mark Robinson, I mean, they're just going to recoil with everything that's been coming out.
I mean, not enough of them, though, will recoil. But then I wanted to say a couple. So Matt Gaetz is back in the news again. Ugh, that's terrible. And their new, more eyewitness testimony. And then there was the Eric Hovde in Wisconsin, who's running for the Senate. He, his bank was sending money to Mexico, and he, of course, did not go ahead. Yeah, go ahead.
Heather, I don't mean to interrupt, but I do want to pull together some of these people because they are all Republicans. They're all bottom feeders. They're kind of weird. They're worse than weird. Mark Robinson is much worse than weird. But Donald Trump has said and talked about Mark Robinson, for example, as Martin Luther King on steroids. That's what Trump said about Robinson. And a lot of these really strange bottom feeder types came out of the woodwork, came out from under stones because of Trump. They were attracted to Republican parties. They have been they're absolutely out of their minds. And that's part of the underlying problem. We need a two-party system, and the Republican Party has turned into, bongo, wacko. I mean, these people are just beyond it.
I know. And then you saw that there's all this crypto money trying to go against Sherrod Brown and propping up the Republican running against him. It's big money. It's big creepy. I mean, it's
big creepy.
Big creepy is just
money.
taking over. But here's my question for you, Bob. If Trump flails and fails and sails and off he goes
into the sunset,
are all of these people, I mean, I would think that the Republican Party would have to rebuild itself. I feel like because Trump is the top of this creepy pyramid, these people cannot, and this is the norm now, which is, so they are weird, but they're also not seen as weird. And you can show people clip after clip after clip of inappropriate behavior and lying, and they say, yeah, I know, but I'm still going to vote for them. So what's going to happen if he's gone? What does Trumpism 2.0 look like with all of these people?
Well, it's a great question. I think, unfortunately, Trump will leave in his wake a kind of normalized creepiness. And that creepiness includes lies. I mean, J.D. Vance is going to still be around. He's still a young man. You have all sorts of people like Robinson. They may leave politics for a while. They will probably drift back like Gaetz. So you have this underworld of creepy Republicans. And unfortunately, the Republican establishment, which I call the Bush Republicans, the people who came out against Trump, they are still wandering in the desert. It's not as if you have a Republican Party at the grassroots that is the Bush party. No, they are still, kind of up in the clouds. The grassroots Republican Party is still, white, working class, rural, non-college. And unfortunately, they have been made into this paranoid group. Many of them, not all of them, obviously, but many of them are willing to take these conspiracy theories and these lies and accept them as normal.
How about Trump's lies this week about Jewish Americans?
Where he said that if you are Jewish and you vote, well, he's been saying this for quite some time. If you're Jewish and you vote for Democrats, you are somehow you're part of a cult, or you're violating what should be your interest.
Because he loves Israel so much that every single Jewish person should vote for him.
Well, it's a form of anti-Semitism, I believe. In fact, he said that at an event about anti-Semitism. But when you stereotype Jews the way Trump does, that is the essence of anti-Semitism. And when Trump basically is angry, I mean, he looks at his polls, particularly among Jews, and he says, no, that can't be right. But if it's right, then I can't stand these Jews. Well, again, Heather, this is what he does. He stereotypes, and you're either for him or against him. And if you're against him, you are really the worst kind of person.
Right. And the Teamsters, of course, this week. So the head of the Teamsters, Sean O'Brien, has said they are not endorsing anyone. And then, of course, Jim Hoffa, the former president, came out and said that's irresponsible. That's a lack of leadership. That's an error. And we know which of these two individuals has been supportive of unions and working families their entire careers. And it's Kamala Harris. What about that?
Well, Kamala Harris has not only been part of an administration that is the most pro-union and labor administration in my history, in my time, that I can possibly remember, but also Kamala Harris herself has done things for the Teamsters and the pension fund and gone out of her way to help these working class people who are part of the labor movement in the Teamsters. Teamsters is a very big union. And a lot of the locals are just saying, well, forget it. We're going to endorse Kamala Harris anyway. There's a political struggle inside the union. It's not unusual, but remember, the head of the union was asked by Trump to speak at the Republican convention. He did so. He took a lot of criticism from the rank and file members by doing so. And I wouldn't be surprised if Sean O'Brien, that's his name, was deposed as the leader of the Teamsters after all of this.
So now I want to move into a segment that you could call I Told You So. But you're too polite. You're too polite to do that.
Well, I told you so. Heather, I told you so.
Bob told you so. So this week, the Fed, I mean, we haven't even talked about the economy yet. The Fed, lowered interest rates. You had said they might try to do 25 basis points. They should do 50, and they did 50. Talk about a soft landing.
Well, I talk to Jerome Powell all the time. Every day he calls, what should I do next? I said, 50 basis points, half a percentage point. No, I don't. But it was the smart thing to do. Interestingly and predictably, Trump said, well, they're just playing politics. The Fed is playing politics. They are not. This was a consensus view among many economists that, basically the Fed has controlled inflation. It's brought inflation down from double digits to just above 2%. And the Fed is justifiably worried about increasing unemployment if they continued on the path they were. So that they were up, the prime rate was up to 5.3%. They're starting to bring it down. That's good for the economy. It's good for low wage Americans because lower wage Americans were paying through the nose for mortgage and for rent indirectly through high mortgage rates and auto loans and credit card fees. So this is all good. And for Trump to say this is a bad political thing, I mean, reveals who he is.
Again.
I mean, he doesn't care about the working class.
No.
He cares about his own political future.
And then the Dow and the S&P 500 record highs yesterday related, right, to it all.
Well, that's right, because obviously when interest rates start coming down, a lot of people who have money, they say, well, I can do better in the stock market. So they move their money into the stock market, which pushes stocks up. And everybody knew that was likely to happen. The question is, how much would the Fed cut? The Fed cut, I think, appropriately, and the stock market has done gangbusters.
I'm surprised Trump didn't try to take credit for that on Truth Social.
But remember, as I've said before, only the richest 1% of Americans own more than half of all of the shares of stock owned by Americans. The richest 10% own 93% of all the shares of stock owned by Americans. So it's not that you're really having any effect on working class Americans.
The stock market is not the economy.
It is not. It's getting less and less to be the economy.
Right. So back in 1996, you went on CNN and you talked about what is basically the authoritarian playbook. You said we have to be so careful about extremist politicians. And you said on the left or right, taking people's fears and their downtrodden economic existence and taking the power away from them and using it against them. Can we watch this clip and then discuss it, please?
Sure.
The way to avoid demagogy on the right or the left about affirmative action, about welfare, about immigrants, about any of these issues is to revive incomes. Because as long as incomes are stuck in the mud, there's going to be a lot of resentment, a lot of anger, and that rage is going to be channeled to all kinds of lightning rods. And irresponsible politicians, of the right or left, are going to use that rage to channel. They're going to say, no imports, America first. They're going to say, let's blame welfare mothers, let's blame immigrants.
There, you said it.
I wish, Heather, I had not been so prescient. But even it was clear even in 1996, that as long as you had this whole class of Americans, most of them white men without college degrees, you're going to have kind of a group that is ripe for the picking in terms of a demagogue. I obviously was not thinking of Donald Trump, but somebody coming along and using hate to stir them up.
But I mean, down to the phrases, America first, immigration. I mean, it's incredible to hear that and see it and now be living it.
It makes me sad.
I know.
Because I don't know, all of us, maybe those of us who were in the political class, I was Secretary of Labor, we should have done more. We could have done more. I mean, we came up short.
I know. I still think Kamala's going to win. I think Kamala's going to win.
I do
so
too.
Let's end
you are
on
right.
that note.
Let's end on a positive note. No, I'm nauseously optimistic. She will win. How many days?
44.
44 days. So everybody out there, let me just say to you, I understand your fears, your anxieties. I understand and sympathize with your worries. And I'm sure Heather does as well. But we have 44 days to make sure. Now, Kamala Harris is doing wonderfully well. Tim Walz is doing great. But we have 44 days to make sure that they are in the White House after January 20th of next year, and not Donald Trump and J.D. Vance. So keep fighting, keep working, keep doing what you're doing. But remember, it's up to us. Thank you all. And Heather, thank you again for your extraordinariness in every way.
Wow. Well, thank you. We'll see you all in a week. And then we'll see you for the vice presidential debate on October 1st.
Have a good week.